You know, we've got the best truck viewers and fans in the entire world. So when we asked you to send us your truck viewer guest review, VGR, we got inundated with them. So today we're going to feature Jake's 2005 Silverado. Now this is a long review. Jake, you did a very thorough review indeed, almost 19 minutes. Everything you wanted to know about the 2005 Silverado is coming up right now on the Fast Lane Truck, thanks to Jake.
We have a 4L60 4-speed transmission, a 342 rear axle ratio, and a 5.3 liter, 295 horsepower, 340 foot-pound of torque V8. And that driveline combination actually makes for a pretty snappy, good driving truck. So being the LT model, this truck features 2 memory settings for the seats, so you can have 2 different drivers, seating, mirror, and lumbar positions and all that sort of stuff memorized. So you just hit 1 and the seat will move into that driver's position. So this one has power folding mirrors. This is a 4-wheel drive model. So it has 4 low, 4 high, 2 high, and an auto 4x4. So then you also, what's nice about this truck is you have your fuel economy, engine oil life, your range, you know, of the amount of fuel you have left in your tank, total fuel used, and back to economy. And you also have engine hours, 2 trip meters, or your odometer, 2 trip meters, and a timer, so like you can time the whole length of a trip. So the seats in this vehicle are really quite comfortable. They have forward and back adjustment. You can obviously move the seat back and forth. And what's cool is you actually have, this is a 4-way switch, and it actually has lumbar adjustment, so it adjusts the, you know, forward and back of the seat, you know, in your lower back. But it also has a width adjustment, so you can actually adjust how much the seat like holds you in. So it's pretty cool because the seat actually, for a smaller person, can like tighten against their sides and make them a little bit more comfortable in, you know, a little bit harder cornering situations, almost like a sports car. So it's actually kind of a neat feature. And then what this also has is it has passenger and driver side armrests, so you can, you know, rest your arm on that instead of the hard plastic of the console. Now for me personally, I'm not a huge fan of them, only because they do block the console button pretty good, so you kind of can't open the console that easily. And they also block the seatbelt release, so you have to put them up every single time you get out of the vehicle to undo your seatbelt. So it's a little bit annoying, but they're very useful and nice overall. Now this vehicle obviously has power locks, but a nice little feature of it is right now I have the key in the vehicle, and so if I hit the lock button, you can see how that unlocks the door. What it does is it doesn't let you lock your keys in your truck, which is pretty cool. I just thought that was kind of a nice feature. So coming to the back here, we have some pretty good storage in the pockets of the door here. We do up front as well, and a cup holder, little compartment here for storage, and hiding behind here are 2 more Bose speakers. This has the Bose speaker package, and you know, nice handles to pull the door open. So it's a nice little setup back here. One of the things I don't like though is I wish these were you know, roll down windows, not just the little pop open windows like the F-150s have of these years. But you know, it's not too bad. So I've actually built this box under here, but normally you would have a flat surface under there to store stuff, and if you do put a box of some sort under there, it gives you quite a bit of storage capacity. I was impressed at how many things I fit under there. So with a quick pull of this tab right here, and you just push the seat up and it locks up in place, you can see that I have tools back here, you know, rags and coat and a power inverter for some reason, some paracord, you know, cans of spray stuff, and just an axe, and just so many different things. You can fit a lot of stuff under that seat if you know, have a box for it. So it's a very, very useful space for a vehicle that, you know, obviously doesn't really have that much interior storage compared to like an SUV. It's great to have a lot of storage under the seat like that. Now, one of my small complaints is that I wish the seat had a split in it so that you could open, you know, half of the seat or 2/3 of the seat at once instead of having to open the whole seat all at once. Because what that does is it, you know, if you have anything on top of the seat, you have to take all that stuff off the seat, and then you can open the seat to get under there. It'd be nice to be able to shift stuff back and forth on the seat and just open half of it in a pinch. But overall, it's a pretty small complaint. So with the seat all the way back, I'm 6 feet tall. I wear a 32-inch inseam. With the seat all the way back, it's very hard for me. My leg is like more than like fully extended to push the gas pedal all the way to the floor. So there's really quite a good amount of leg room in here, and my left foot also is like fully extended just to touch the touch the firewall of the truck. So there's quite a bit of leg room in here. I mean, I couldn't comfortably drive with the seat all the way back by any means. I mean, even my arm is just fully extended, and I have, you know, plenty of headroom here. Put the seat up to a more comfortable spot for me. So what I'll do is, at my seating position, so I'm 6 feet tall at my seating position, which I will admit is probably a bit closer than most other 6 feet tall people. I'll show you the rear seat room. So being an extended cab, you can tell obviously I don't have a whole lot of leg room back here. Being 6 foot, you know, this is a pretty cramped place for me to be. I also don't have very much headroom, but the point is that even though it's not that spacious back here, you can definitely ride back here for a couple hours if you absolutely have to, and it's not too uncomfortable. So overall, it's not a terrible place to be, even if you are a taller person. The bed is pretty standard 6.5 foot box. There's really nothing too special about it. It's about the same as every other 6.5 foot box in the industry. You know, maybe it's an inch shorter, or an inch thinner, or whatever, but they're all about the same. So what it does have for hookups to hook up straps and stuff is you do have 4 hooks down here. So you have 1 hook there, you have another one on this side, and then you have 2 up front. The other thing that I do like about this pickup that might be, it's a bit different from other trucks. All trucks have it in some form or another, but you have these gaps here for the indents there for putting like 2x8s or 2x4s or whatever height wood you want, and you can kind of cordon off the bed. And then you also have little spots here, then you have another one and another one, so that you could put boards, you know, horizontally across the bed and like cover your wheel well if you ever wanted to for some reason. So you could like build like kind of a subfloor higher in the pickup if that was ever a necessity. So it gives you like a nice modular platform that you can build off of and do some cutting and, you know, of wood and or some metal, you know, square steel tube, and really make for a usable space for your very specific, you know, need that you might have. So seeing as this truck has the Z71 package, let's take her off-road a little bit. So you can see that not being as heavily sprung as some of the new model trucks, it really allows, even though it has leaf springs, for some decent axle articulation, because the tire is pretty shoved up in the wheel well on that side. And then if we go over here, you know, this side's barely touching the ground, so it's really, you know, pretty good articulation as far as, you know, side to side. Obviously the independent front suspension doesn't do so well, but still, I mean, I climbed right up this hill no problem, and it's a pretty good truck's at a pretty good angle. Nothing that extreme, but now one thing I will point out is that with these trucks you are going to get a bit of bed flex. So here, I'll go across the truck here. So you can see that the bed slopes up a bit. That's pretty common. You're not hurting anything, you're just twisting the frame a bit. Most trucks do that. So as far as just drivability when empty, that's actually one of my favorite things about the truck. It's a lot smoother than I had expected. I came from an 04 Ford Explorer, and I expected the ride of this thing to be pretty bumpy and, you know, really feel like a truck. But I can happily say that although it feels like a truck, you know, it doesn't feel like you're driving a car, which I personally like. You know, it's got a bit of a bounce to it, and, you know, you can feel the bumps a bit. Despite that, it's very, it's very comfortable, actually. You know, you can drive this thing down a, you know, broken up dirt road, and it's by no means uncomfortable to do so. Now, this truck is actually quite a quiet vehicle on the inside. I do have a custom aftermarket exhaust on it, so it's louder on the inside because it's a pretty loud exhaust too. But in stock configuration, I drove this for about 2 months in stock configuration, and it's very quiet on the inside. A little bit of tire noise, but I also do have a little bit more aggressive tires on it, so there is that. But in pure stock configuration, it's actually a very quiet truck. So if you're, you know, concerned about the wife not being happy with it, I think you'll be okay with this truck as long as you don't go ahead and modify it like I did. But another thing I like to note about this truck, going around turns and braking, the truck feels really steady. It's obviously not a sports car, but the brakes really don't leave anything to be desired. This actually has rear drum brakes, but despite that, they bite pretty hard. And what I actually like about the rear drum brakes is you have a real solid emergency brake for an emergency, or for when you're towing a trailer and you're parked on a hill. It's really nice to know that you have four big brake pads on, you know, between the two rear wheels holding your truck in place and your trailer in place. So it's, you know, it's actually a nice little feature in my opinion. A lot of people don't like drum brakes, but I don't mind. So this truck at night, when you have your high beams, or when you have your low beams on, you know, you have your 2 low beam bulbs on. When you switch to your high beams, the 2 low beam bulbs turn off and only the high beams go on. GM's done this on a lot of their vehicles for many years, and I've never been a fan of that. It's perfectly legal in, I think, every single state, and a lot of vehicle stock come with their lights in such a way that when the low beams are on, you know, just the low beams are on, but when you flick the high beams on, the low beams stay on. And I think that's a lot better setup than having the low beams turn off. But, you know, that's just my personal preference. I wouldn't say I feel unsafe driving at night by any means. The lights are adequate. I just would desire more light, given, you know, all else being equal. One tip I'd definitely give someone is always reverse park in any pickup, because with the wheelbase length, it's a heck of a lot easier to pull out of a parking spot than it is to pull out of a parking spot when you're parked forward than it is to when you're parked backwards. Yeah, just my gripes would be is that in the driver's side footwell here, there's really it's quite a bit of space. I like the way they set it up. You know, the pedals are kind of under the dash pretty far, so you can have your seat pretty close to the steering wheel, which I personally like. Even though I am 6 foot, you know, I can still sit pretty close to the dash without feeling like I'm, you know, on top of the dash, because my feet, you know, I have enough legroom. But what I don't like is that the left leg, essentially, area where you put your left foot, kind of like where the clutch would be if it were a manual. There's not really very much in the name of that's a good tight squeeze. There's not very much in the name of footroom there. I mean, it's not bad. It's not any worse than the fact that the driver's pedal's in the way. But I feel like if they reshaped the firewall a little bit, they could have given you an extra 2 or 3 inches by your left foot, so when you're on a long highway drive, you can really stretch that foot out. And the reason that becomes more important is because it's an extended cab, if you have passengers in the rear, it's kind of unfortunate for them if you feel compelled to move your seat any farther back than you need it to be moved, so that you don't crowd their legroom, you know, because they don't have that much legroom to begin with. So it's nice to give your rear seat passengers as much legroom as possible. So from that perspective, I do wish they tidied up the footwell area a bit more and gave you just a bit more footwell space. But I'm sure that they probably did the best they could given given the space they had. This is only a 4-speed transmission. The only disadvantage you really get towing is that you have a very big gear spacing between first and second gear. So what Chevy did with this transmission was, rather than make a truck that had very even gear spacings between 1, 2, 3, and 4, what they did was they made the first and second gear spacing pretty big, but then your 2, 3, and 4 are a lot closer. So what happens is, when you're on the highway or anywhere between like 40 to 70 miles an hour, if you need to downshift and get some more power to go up a hill, you're not really screaming the engine into the next lower gear. You actually have some good RPM options. So really it was a pretty good setup. But the only compromise is having that short gear spacing from first to second meant that accelerating could be a bit of an issue with a trailer on. So when you're towing with a truck like this, or with one of these Silverados, the best thing that I've noticed to do is obviously use the tow haul mode, which is actually really good. What the tow haul mode does is it extends your shift points on these trucks. So basically it just does not put it into the next highest gear for a lot longer time. It lets you have a lot more throttle input. It lets you hold that gear a lot longer. And then when it does finally shift, it firms the shifting up. So it actually kind of bangs into the next gear a little bit harder, which is good because it wears the clutches and the transmission out less. So between the tow haul mode and when you're accelerating in first gear, especially if you're going up a hill with a trailer on, all you got to do, it's pretty nice and easy. You just half throttle, whatever, but you rev it up to like 4,000 RPM or greater. So you do wind the engine up a bit, but then when it does drop into second gear, you're at a decent RPM to keep accelerating. It doesn't drop too far to where you're kind of lugging the truck. And I've noticed if you do that, this thing tows great, even up hills and stuff. Obviously, it's a bit of a shortcoming that you'll never fully overcome, but the thing with these LS motors, what's nice about them, is that when they make good low-end torque, but their peak torque is at 4,000 RPM, so you can really tack the truck out all the way to 5,800, I think that's the red line, and you're still making good amounts of torque and real good horsepower. So if you really need to, get moving in a situation, you can just rev it right to red line in first gear, it'll drop into second, and at that point, when it drops into second, it'll lose about 2,000 RPM, so it's going from 5,800 to about 3,800, but that's right where your peak torque is. So actually, that big gear spacing from first to second, it's more of an inconvenience than an actual disadvantage.
If you'd like us to feature your review as another VGR viewer guest review, we'd love that. Send us your video to info@tfltruck.com. Please, unlike Jake, who actually did an okay thing, don't add any music because that stuff is probably copywritten and we can't use it unless you're using YouTube music, or you know what, just don't use it. And send it to us at info@tfltruck and we'll be glad to feature you and your truck. And remember, a review is not just about what you love, but what you don't like. And that way we can all learn about these old or classic trucks, or heck, even new trucks. See you next time on the Fast Lane Truck. And thank you, Jake. Much appreciated.